Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Could you share your alright then I resign story, part 3? Excuse me for being so vague in this story. It all happened earlier this month, and I'd like to keep as little personal information as possible out of it. Also, I'm sorry that this will be wordy and hard to follow at times because I'm leaving out details. Not long ago, I worked for a small IT company. There, one of the lead techs asks me to work on a big project with a system I've never used before. I was happy to work on it as it'd be something new to learn, but I told them that I would need time and a separate dev environment as I didn't know my way around any of the aspects of this system. To my surprise, I was given a nice development environment to work in, and I was able to work on that project for almost the whole first day. Things don't get better after this. The guy who runs the business gave me a lot of other work to do right after the first day. What did the senior tech say about the big project he gave me? He said it wasn't that important and that I should work on his projects for now. I'd have plenty of time to work on this big project later. Over the course of the next 2 months, I'd try to work on it wherever I could, but I'd get stuck on something for a short while and be pulled away from the work just as I was trying to test a solution to whatever problem I was facing. It was hard to work on the smaller parts of the job because of all the interruptions, which hurt the quality of the work. I tried to make this clear right away, but no one seemed to hear me. Over the course of 2 months, I worked on the project for about 36 hours, which is a little less than a week's worth of time. I wasn't able to focus on it, though. When my boss called me into a meeting on Thursday, this made me very angry. He was mad that I wasn't making any progress and asked how much longer I was going to take. I told them I didn't know because I was having trouble with something at the time. It was the end of the month and he told me to finish everything. I was sent on my way before I could even say anything. This made me lose it and I quickly left for lunch. On the way, I had a severe anxiety attack in my car in the Walmart parking lot. Took me a couple of hours of freaking out in my car before I calmed down enough to text a friend/coworker there that I wouldn't be coming back that day, probably not even Friday. After driving home, I spent the weekend typing an email trying to be as polite as possible as I said I didn't want to work on this project anymore and that I thought the whole thing was a waste of time. Even though I told them I needed time, they didn't give it to me. It felt like they were looking for someone to blame because the project was late. I told them I still wanted to work there. I liked most of the work I did there and I thought things could get better. Monday rolls around and I meet in the boss's office where he talks around in circles for 2 hours trying to avoid the issues I brought up in the email and instead just goes on about vague reasons he thinks I'm not a good fit for the company. During the last hour of the conversation, his wife, who also runs the business, walks in. I don't say much during that time while they talk. Finally, I've had enough. I tell them that it doesn't sound like they want me there, so I agree to leave. It was a slow day for tech, so they asked me to stay until the end of the day. If I left, the boss would have to answer the phones. After turning in my last bill and saying goodbye to everyone, I said no and left. I'll just barely be able to pay the rent this month and next, but I'm not going to stay there. He even told me I could use him as a reference for my next job, but I don't believe him. My cover's 3 quits. 1 low-paying job for a generic replacement parts company as a receiver. After the probationary period, I'm informed that the promised pay increase is not coming through. The owner's son installs bells and a time clock to indicate when our breaks are scheduled throughout the warehouse. After I receive my paycheck one fine Friday, a 40-foot container shows up. Everything needs to be unloaded by myself by 5 p.m. or else they'll be charged an additional amount for the container. Removed my work gloves and bid me farewell. Once more, a recipient, this time from a sizable pharmacy chain. I got a complaint stating that I wasn't providing any assistance to a floor stalker. I would normally offer assistance to anyone who asked, but this person never did. I told the owner what was going on and that I'm a receiver, not a front-end person, which came out to be more offensive than I had anticipated. A month later, the owner confronts me once more, asking why I'm not filling in for the stalker who's constantly complaining about me. They too had a strict schedule, so it was my job to unload and process all deliveries as soon as possible. I was also in charge of accepting and processing prescription medications. However, the diaper aisle took precedence, so I said goodbye to that position. Third quit involved working retail. We were required to place our partially counterfeit $10 coupons, one side detailed to resemble a $10 bill, but only folded in half to prevent it being mistaken for a fake, on every vehicle in the hotel parking lot that we were renting. Two guys, who were clearly tourists, entered and started shopping for their girlfriends back home. Their total purchases easily equaled the sales for a typical month. I said yes when the guy asked for a discount. I replied, I can only give you what we usually give if you've got a car out in the hotel lot, $10 off. They let out a laugh and acknowledged that. It wasn't the store owner. He became furious, accusing me of robbing him of his site by offering such a large and needless discount. He had a purple face. The store key detached from the key ring, and that was that. As this thread has extensively documented, one piece of advice for the younger generation is to never threaten to give up. Make preparations if you know that you'll soon be fired or that you must quit from your current position because you don't like it there. One of the major investors carried out a hostile acquisition. He entered the room unexpectedly during our daily stand-up and gave a brief introduction, talking about how much money he had and how he had sold his first business to buy his first house. He made an extremely accurate introduction, saying that the only people in the room that mattered to him were his two friends, who were also fairly decent software engineers, but not as socially adept as he was. He didn't care about anyone else in the room. This new boss literally called everyone autists behind their backs, went against everything the actual owners wanted, tried to cancel all of our vacation requests, which he had no legal right to do in our country, so that obviously fell through, and did all of this while I was in the same room. He quickly attempted to make amends, saying he wasn't referring to me, but you know who I'm talking about. It wasn't overnight, but in about 6 to 12 months, the company shrank from about 20 folks down to just 6 by the time I'd found a new job in a foreign country. He was practically celebrating as we shrank because, thanks to drastically lower costs, the company was profitable and making him money. This was despite the fact that the business was barely scraping by and that all of the much-anticipated new features that had kept customers coming to the table had all but stopped. Today, the company no longer exists. Tell me a scary story about your HOA, COA, or neighbors, Part 3. Last year, I made my first home purchase. It wasn't really an option for me to buy a property without a homeowners association, so I went with one. The fact that I had to wait until after the purchase to get the HOA documents bothered me right away, but that's a minor quibble. Along with the common areas, there are 265 properties that are part of the association. It appears that the dues increase annually. We currently pay $146 per month, roughly $37,000 from each property. There are only about 2 small common areas, so it's inexplicable that the entire $37,000 is used every month for exterior repairs that are required in common upkeep. For instance, my neighbor's soffit above his garage needs to be repaired, but they haven't had the time to do it in almost 2 years. However, it was only a dozen days after I assumed ownership that I began to receive fines for a dead lawn. I was actually unloading my truck when I received my first fine in the mail. No joke. How the heck about it? That the homeowners who make up the association are essentially in charge of the neighborhood as a whole, but are effectively run by a board of directors who are not required to reside there by definition is, in my opinion, a conflict of interest. I interpret this as meaning that a distinct organization that is not connected to my neighborhood has the final say over the affairs and financial matters of the impacted homeowners. Moreover, the man who runs the neighborhood-based management firm that manages the finances resides there. He goes about levying fines and collecting money. That seems completely ridiculous to me. This management company will stop at nothing to avoid providing furnishing services, review the soffit issue with my neighbor. To make things even more annoying, they don't have an electronic payment system and won't put one in place, so I have to send them a check every month from my bank. They also seem to believe that 6 weeks is a reasonable amount of time to approve property updates. I want to find a reasonable and contemporary management company and take over this board of directors. My scary story about the HOA was with this crazy old lady who lives in the complex and is a member of the HOA. Even though we reside in the complex, we parked outside in the guest parking. If you're not a guest, you are not permitted to park outside. We left it outside for the night because we forgot. At 3 a.m, we suddenly remember the rules and head outside to park our car in the garage. It should be noted that very few people visit our complex during the night. The insane elderly woman is seen chatting with the driver of a tow truck while standing next to it. The heck? Will she wake up at 2 in the morning only to tow our vehicles? We had to pay $250 in order to regain our car. Not only was this ridiculous, but no guests were stopping by. By taking a spot, we weren't preventing someone from parking. We now refer to her as CPL, which stands for Crazy Psychopath Lady. The short version of my scary story is HOA have done a terrible and unfair job operating and maintaining the HOA. I have reason to suspect that either negligence or embezzlement has taken place because certain members are being singled out and harassed more than others. Complete lack of transparency. Longer version, our first annual meeting in over 4 years is coming up. I've asked them to send out notices of their meeting in advance so that people can make plans to attend. After about a week, they decide to cancel. They have harassed and singled out specific people, and they won't provide details about their finances or budget, just broad summaries, or provide receipts for payments made for annual dues and fines. They refuse to provide information that ought to be available to the public, such as meeting schedules, board members, and minutes. A web page doesn't exist. Their company is non-existent. When they issue violations, they must correct them on their own CC&Rs. I've asked for a record of all CC&R infractions and resident corrective actions over a specific period of time, but I've been turned down. They're not transparent at all. I've gotten in touch with the state, county, and city. None of them have listed or any information about them. The Attorney General said that we would essentially have to sue ourselves, but they would not provide details on the legal procedure. I apologize for the outburst, but I've tried to summarize 8 years of nonsense, but there's a lot more to be said. I'm aware that legal counsel is available, but after attempting to get it from the city, the nation, and the state, I'm not sure who or what to ask. Our HOA seems to exist without really existing, and HOAs in general seem like such an ambiguous entity. Edit. I've read the CC&Rs thoroughly, but there's no information about the dissolution procedure, not to mention that the year 2002 marks their expiration. We only agreed to it because, should they really manage to get their act together, I don't want a lien placed on our property or to face foreclosure. Update. There was no official business discussed or decided upon because we lacked quorum. They do not have legal standing with the government or any other local government. As of right now, they're not incorporated. 3 of our 5 board members are in place, and one of them is attempting to step down but wants a replacement. Since everyone else resigned before them, they were all appointed rather than elected. Because no one else wants to step up, the board president was appointed in September during a meeting that only half of the attendees were aware of. He is not interested in the job. The management company is also new, having signed a contract last July. Our fund is insolvent. We owe the management company, insurance, and utilities a total of, I believe, $12,000. Currently, the board is unable to pursue collections for CC&R infractions. It appears that the management company and the board believe each other's holding things up and obstructing progress. It's far more disorganized than I ever would have thought. Over her tenure, the woman who used to be in charge of everything appears to have driven the HOA into the ground. She seemed to be the owner of the management company in addition to serving on the board. There's a serious conflict of interest there, so I plan to investigate. I'm not on the deed, but everyone at the meeting tried to appoint me to the board. My Chinese parents-in-law, with whom I share a home with my spouse, think that American culture will eventually force me to file for divorce and take ownership of the home. I wouldn't ask to be on the deed, nor would I anticipate being there. Since English is not their first language, they've granted me power of attorney to speak on their behalf to the HOA, but this is insufficient to get me onto the board. My current sphere of influence is limited, but the management company and board promise to stay in touch, respond to any and all of my inquiries, and let me assist to the extent permitted by the law. We'll be holding another meeting in October, and going forward, I believe I'll knock on doors and beg my neighbors to come along so that we can have a formal meeting and make decisions. The management company expressed a degree of optimism regarding the possibility of dissolution given the current state of the HOA. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.